Hey? Hello. Oh shit, it works. That's a bonus. Hello, oh wow. Hello, good evening everybody. Thanks for coming to this year's lure fishing seminar. I am Dan, the big fellow with no hair down the back is Wayne, and we run New Zealand Lure Masters. If you haven't heard of it, it's a premier lure fishing competition in New Zealand that we'd love you to enter. It's only next weekend, doesn't give you a lot of time to get off work. But tonight we are going to be talking you through, Justin's going to be talking about soft baiting. Just kidding, Mark, he's going to be talking. We had a little plan earlier to say that, and I had $10 bet with him that Mark would pipe up and say, no, that's me, and that happened, so there you go. Mark will be talking about soft baiting, and Justin will be talking about how to catch kingfish on lures. Mark Kitteridge likes to talk a lot, so at the 20-minute mark, I'd appreciate it if you'll start clapping, and we'll slowly clap him off the stage, otherwise we'll be here till midnight. So just keep that in the back of your mind, but first up, I'm just going to switch over the lapel. Justin Corric is going to come have a chat, so give him a round of applause.
My name's Justin, I'm from Daiwa, New Zealand. I'm lucky enough to have made my passion and my hobby my job. I think I fluked into it, started sweeping floors, and now I'm up here talking to you people. Firstly, I just want to thank Hunting and Fishing, North Shore, Dave and Pete, wherever you guys are, and the whole crew. They've put on a phenomenal night. There's not many, obviously, places that have this type of room to be able to put these amount of people together, so it's actually a really real big benefit to be able to get you all here tonight. So thanks to the Hunting and Fishing guys. I'm just here briefly. We're not going to talk too long tonight. We don't want to keep you for ages. If there's any questions, we can blurt a few out. If not, I'll be around for ages afterwards if you've got any real specific. So I'm just going to talk about probably one of my main passions, which is kingfish, and my main way I like to basically target them. Back in the day it was live baiting, and then I realised that, you know, live baiting was a pain in the ass. If you need to try and buy live baits, you can't get one to save yourself when you need them, and then when you don't need them, there's plenty around. So I got into more lure fishing, topwater, jigging, poppers. I started watching the Japanese because those guys are absolutely phenomenal. They're absolute masters of their craft, and they've perfected everything they do in any style of fishing. So I looked for them as far as their topwater and their jigging actions go. You know, I looked at their rods, their reels, everything they were using and doing, and it was quite different, obviously, than what was on the market back in the day. So I started adapting to the gear they were using. So I'll talk briefly on topwater first. Obviously, the gear we use, they tend to be minimum 7.5 up to 8.5 foot rods, and they're going to be spin reels. And the reason being is purely because we're casting a lot. Now, if anyone doesn't know, which I'm sure there's a lot of very good fishermen in the audience, which I recognise a lot of you, the difference between stick baiting and popper fishing, it is a little bit different. A popper, really good at attracting fish, but it's a very one-dimensional lure. It literally goes forward, okay? Apart from real specifically designed ones, they'll just go forward, chug, make a big splash, that's all they do, okay? Really good for ambush predators, you know, for instance, like you go GT fishing in the islands, they smash poppers because the reason, you know, once they're down deeper and they see a splash on the water, they'll commit to it. Okay, the one thing with stick baits is if you straight away look at the shape of them, they have basically a pointy nose, okay? They don't have a round cup face, which is what a lot of poppers do. So what a stick bait allows you to do is now, instead of just having a one-dimensional forward action, they actually have a lot of lateral movement, okay? So when kingies come up, and with poppers, they'll tend to, I'm not saying they're super smart, but they will have a look at what they're chasing, and if it doesn't look natural, they are going to turn away from it, okay? So the one thing with stick baits is because they have that lateral movement, when they tend to come up and start chasing your lures, because now it's got more of an erratic movement, which you can change by the speed of your sweep, speed of your wind, it's now going to have a lot more fish-like action opposed from a popper that when you sweep, all it does is chug forward, makes a splash, makes some commotion, but when a fish comes to look at it, he goes, hang on, this thing's actually not swimming like a natural fish would. So that's your main difference between popper fishing and stick baiting. Very similar gear, very similar technique, but actually quite vastly different lures. Now, as far as the lure size we use, to me, one of the most important things I do, if I'm not getting a kingfish hit my stick bait and I'm getting them following, the first thing I'll do before I change any colours is I'll change the size. So I'll usually start off with the biggest stick bait I've got, because at the end of the day, kingfish, induction feeders, they'll suck a massive car and they always go for big feeds, okay? So I'll always go a bigger stick bait first. But if I get them coming up, swimming, and I'm getting a lot of refusals, so what that means is they're coming up, having a look at it, but they're not actually biting, the first thing I'll do is I'll wind in. I won't bother with any colour changes. I will actually change my size and I'll go to a lot smaller. I'll go to one of the smaller stick baits I can. And 9 times out of 10 for me, that has got me a bite, especially if I know they're feeding, but they're not hitting a big lure, I'll change down to a smaller one. Another thing you can do too as well is if your bait's holding down, there's 2 little cheating methods to get fish to rise back up. One of them is to give your mates a jig rod, which is essentially a lot shorter set, and you get them to jig, which can be a lot more hard work. And what you do is you get them to jig, and then the fish follow up, and especially if they hook one, get them up, and then you stand there with your stick bait when the fish have risen, cast over the top of them. It's one of the easiest ways to get a nice easy rise if the bait are holding down deeper. Secondly, you can look at a sinking stick bait. So 9 times out of 10, floating stick baits are the most successful to use. The reason being is kingfish, they'll ball bait up, they'll come to the surface, they like seeing splashing and moving around. There'll be a lot of times if we want to get a bite also from kingfish and get them up and raise them up, well sometimes if you've got a deck wash on your boat, we get a deck wash, shoot that up in the air, and if you listen to the sound of water spraying on the water, it just sounds like bait fish scattering, and for some fish it scares them away. Kingfish, they're real inquisitive, they'll come up and see what that is. So you can do anything you can. There's quite a few different ways to raise kingfish up from deeper reefs. So we've been in reefs up to 100 metres deep, and we've jigged kings up, and once they've followed up, because a lot of them when you get one hooked up, they'll all follow up, and then we've been able to cast stick baits, and we've had all the fish literally rise and stay on the surface, and we've had acres of kingfish that were down holding at sort of 50, 60 metres. So topwater fishing, as far as if you want to raise them up, there are a few little cheeky methods to get them up. As far as colours go, I tend to use high vis colours. As far as like bright pinks, real bright colours, I use them first thing in the morning, I use them in rough water, and I use them in change light in the evening. Okay? If I've got a real still, calm, glassy day, I'll go to a supernatural colour. So I'll be like a pilchard imitation, a slimy mac imitation, something that looks really, really natural, because I feel personally that if they're in real clean, calm, clear water, they're going to look for a more natural one, where in the dimmer lights and the rougher water, I'll go to something a little bit brighter. And saying that, kingfish and snapper and that, they can't see colour, they can see shades of colour. So they pick up certain shades as to certain styles of bait fish. So they can see UV. And you've got to remember pretty much everything to a fish underneath looks black. So depending on the colour you use, you're essentially just making whatever lure it is look slightly a darker shade. Okay, so that can change though, depending on your time of day, the light, change of light, all that type of thing. So don't be afraid of changing your size up and your colour up. As far as hooks go, we try and fish singles where we can, or double hooks, double swinging hook rigs, or treble hooks barbless if we can. If we do get stick baits with barbs on them, we'll crush the barbs down. It's just more of a, to be fair, it's more of a safety thing, and it's easier to get kingfish on and off if you've got something that's barbless or single hooks. A lot of people say that you don't get as many hookups with twin trebles. That is probably true because you've got a lot of hooks. But if you do get a hookup with single hooks, you'll get usually a better hookup. So it will hook up and it will stay really well hooked. So trebles, the only thing is to be aware of is if you're buying a stick bait off the shelf and it's already rigged with trebles, 9 times out of 10, it's because that's how that stick bait has actually been tuned to swim. Okay? Imagine a stick bait essentially like a yacht. If you had a yacht with a big sail and the keel wasn't big enough, the thing's not going to sail right. Okay? Stick bait's the same. Some stick baits need a certain amount of drag and weight under, especially around the belly of it, to actually pull the belly down, because if anyone's casting these stick baits and they've changed the hooks around and stuff, and they've been doing their sweeping and they find the stick baits are tumbling out of the water and not swimming right, a lot of the time that can be because they have changed the actual hooks that they've done on it, and they've made it now too light in the nose end, and it's now not getting its nose down. Okay, the action we use for stick baiting, it's pretty easy. We'll cast out as far as we can. I'll give a wind. It's a long sweep, and then it's just a slow wind back up. It's nice and easy. You can sometimes do the sweep faster. You can do little sweeps. You can do little jabs. But at the end of the day, you just want that stick bait moving as much as you can, and then you want to pause for a second where the head pops up, and then it pops back down. Okay, so it's a real easy motion. Couple of little key secrets with casting. When I cast my stick baits, the second I've cast, I've got my bail wire ready to engage, because the second it hits the water, I want it to be a splash, and I want that stick bait to be up, and I want it moving out of the water straight away. Like, I don't want it to be sitting there, because kings will come up. Trust me, if you've cast where they are and you know they're there and they've seen a splash, they'll come up, and if they see the stick bait sitting there with its ass down, head up, they're like, that's not a fish. So they're going to usually shy away real quick. So what you want to see is you want to see a splash, and the instant they see it, they all of a sudden see what they think's a fish taken off from it. The other thing I do with my sweep is I'll start off slow, and then at the end of the sweep I'll get it a bit faster. And the reason being is with stick baits, they will start off, the slower the sweep, the bigger the swim is. So essentially it'll be a wider swim, which most fish are just cruising. But then the faster the sweep is when, like if a king was chasing a bait fish and it noticed something was chasing it, it's going to speed up, right, and take off. So that's when they're going to speed up, tail's going to go faster, and the faster you sweep it, that stick bait now will go from wide turns to little sharp turns, and they'll be a lot faster, and that can get that kingfish to go, okay, that's a bait fish, it's seen me, and it's now taken off, and that's going to tend to make it come up and engage into that. So any questions so far? No? All good? With your topwater gear, there's a couple of different styles of fishing that I don't skimp on. One of them is, as Mark will talk about, is soft baiting. I don't skimp on my gear there because I'm asking tiny gear to catch monster fish, so therefore the quality has to be a little bit up there. Same with topwater. For me, topwater, I fish as higher in gear as I can, for the reason being is I'm targeting big fish. Also, because I'm casting line out to them, I'm essentially giving that fish, I'm giving him probably 40, 50 metres of line, and if I'm only in 20, 30 metres of water, he's only got to swim down and he's into the reef. So therefore, I want gear that I'm able to stop big fish, and I'm able to stop them really hard and really fast. The other thing is, anyone that's fished in the Hauraki Gulf knows how many bronzies are around. And to me, I don't like my kings to get eaten by sharks. I like to either get them to the boat if I'm releasing, or get them back in without anything missing if I'm having them for a feed. So the heavier, the better quality gear you have, the quicker you're going to be able to dispatch the fish and get it into the boat. So for me, I use as high gear as I can with soft baiting and in topwater. And saying that, if you are looking at getting into it, you can start off with entry level gear, start around the $400 mark, and you'll still get a set that's got at least 15 kilos of drag, grunty enough reel. I fish minimum 80-pound braid, and the reason being is that your diameter difference between 50 and 80 pound is so marginal that I would rather fish slightly heavier, because I have the advantages that I can put a lot more hurt on. Because when I fish these types of sets, I fish as hard and as heavy as I can hang on to, because like I said, I want to get to the fish to the boat as quickly and as safely as possible. So that's why I fish the type of gear that I fish. But like I said, this set that I'm holding here is probably about $2.5 grand. So from 400 to 2.5 grand, there's price points in between. So pretty much what I say is buy as good as you can obviously, allow yourself to spend, and that is the best way to go when you're going for topwater or for soft bait fishing. As far as my favourite colours go, black's one of my favourites and pink's one of my favourites, and then if I'm going real clear, I'll stick to a natural pilchard or mackerel imitation. So those are the colours I tend to go for. The sizes, I prefer like a 180 up to a 220. Those are my realms. Don't be too scared of being big on your stick baits. If anyone's seen the size of a normal pilchard, it's bigger than most stick baits. I see a lot of people look on the shelf and they go, oh, that's going to be way too big. Kingfish, honestly, if you've seen some of the 3 kilo kahawai we've had get swallowed down by kings that are only barely even 15 kilos, they will stuff down a big feed. The one thing about kingfish, when they chase something, okay, they're one species that they actually weigh up how much energy they're going to get from what they eat. That's why if you're jig fishing, which is another style that I really, really like, you'll get a lot of times where a kingfish might follow your jig up. They'll only tend to follow it up, especially the smarter ones, they'll follow it up only a certain way, and then they'll actually swim away if they don't feel that it's worth getting or the action's not quite right. So that's why it's good to change your actions up in that, because kings will want to eat the amount of energy they need that's worth chasing it. Like for instance, to eat a little pilchard, for them to chase it up from about 50, 60 metres, and I learnt this from a marine biologist, he said the energy they get from that one pilchard wouldn't have even pretty much put the energy back for that little burst that they had to chase that fish. So kingfish are one that they do weigh up. They're not like snapper where they're a bit more scavengy. Kings will literally weigh up what they're eating. So that's why it's really good to work on your methods, work on your techniques, work on your jigging styles. It's really good to change things up. One big key thing I get asked for is leader. For me personally, on a set like this, I fish minimum 130 pound, and I don't fish fluorocarbon. Okay, the reason I don't fish fluorocarbon for me personally, I use fluorocarbon for live baiting. But with this type of fishing, because the fish come in and they hit so hard, and I'm fishing braid. Braid has basically 0% stretch, or not even 2% stretch depending on the brand, but I won't get into full details. But basically braid's got no stretch. You've now got a short trace, and the trace length that I choose, so for instance, when I'm roughly measuring it up, if I'm casting, I'm going to have my stick bait about there, okay? Now the reason I don't tell anyone exactly the length, because it depends on the rod they're fishing. And the reason being is that the one thing you don't want to do is, that's where my knot is, which I use an FG knot. I do not want any of that leader at all on my reel. And the reason being is because when you go to do a big massive cast with these, and trust me, you want to cast as far as you can, because put it this way, the further you cast, the more distance and time you've got for a fish to be able to chase it. So you're essentially just covering more distance. The shorter you cast, the less distance you got to cover. So the further you cast for top water, the more your lure's in the water, so the more chance you've got. But if you go to cast this and all this trace here is wrapped around there, I'll tell you what's going to happen. You're going to cast and this braid is going to overtake, and if you don't end up with a massive big knot here, all you're going to do is have like a cast that goes about 20 meters, if that. Okay, so you want your knot, at least your knot or some form of the trace out from there. And the reason I don't have an exact length is because it depends on the rod. Because this rod, if this had been a shorter rod, then obviously the leader length would be shorter. So the way I tell people is I have my stick bait about 3 to 4 guides down, and then I make sure my knot is anywhere between my bail wire and the first guide. As long as it's somewhere in there, I try to have it roughly about there, for the reason being is that I want my finger just on the mono, and the reason being is that if it's on the braid, it just sometimes whips your finger a little bit if you're doing a lot of casting. So as far as leader length, I go that. The reason I go mono over fluorocarbon is that fluorocarbon's a lot stiffer, so I tend to find that it can prevent my stick baits from getting their full lateral movement. Also, mono has a lot more stretch in it than fluorocarbon does. And like I said to you, fluorocarbon, bugger all stretch, and braid's got no stretch, so if you put those two together, your knots better be really, really good, because if you do get a big fish and it hits hard, and you're fishing heavy drag like we do, you can pop knots, you can snap traces, snap braids. So I like to be some given the system, because you're talking braid that's got no stretch, and we've only got a couple of meters of mono there, so there's actually not a lot of stretch in the whole system. So with mono, I tend to find that I've got a bit more stretch, and because you'll hear a lot of people, it's called shock leader, and it's called shock leader for a reason, because it needs to take some shock out of the system so that it doesn't put too much stress on your knots at either end of it. So that's why I use mono for jigging and for top water, and then I use fluorocarbon if I'm live baiting. You know, just because it's better abrasion resistancy for its diameter, and it's also not seen through the water. Where with lure fishing and with kingfish, when they're chasing things, I don't find, in my opinion, that I've ever found them to be too hung up on whether I'm using fluorocarbon or mono as far as them seeing it when they're chasing lures. I think once they've engaged that they're chasing something and I'm doing everything right, they're usually going to come in and smack it, and I don't think having fluorocarbon to mono is going to change it. If they're live baiting, that can be a little bit different, where they come down and can get a little bit line shy. So that's why I stick to mono. And like I said, the length depends on your rod. As long as you've got your knot between here and here, and you've got pretty much 3 to 4 guides roughly down for your stick bait, so that you've got enough to be able to cast.
I am really, really happy to be here, representing hunting and fishing here. It's a place that is very close to my heart already, and so is fishing. It's definitely been a part of my life for a long time now. I started way too long ago, and interestingly, the topic that I'm talking about, which is soft baiting, I was doing that around 45 years ago with some very early incarnations of it, Mr. Twisters, and although not very well set up at the time for it to be super successful, it still showed me what sort of potential it had. At the time we were just targeting mostly kingfish and John Dory, and there was a lot of gear failure. But of course now everything's really moved on a lot, and you can just be so efficient at catching fish on soft baits. It's really captivated me, and the road to actually becoming a good soft baiter has been a really intriguing and challenging one. Unlike some of you guys here, where you're able to go and watch lots of videos and that sort of thing, because I started so early, we were the guys who were having to find out how to do it. And I remember, in fact, When you were saying, Justin, how it's when you actually leave your gear, the other gear, your safety security blanket gear back at home, and you're forced to go and fish a specific type of tackle with a specific technique, that's the way to learn. And I can remember just being so horrified that I was going to have to leave all my bait at home and only soft bait all day. But at the end of the day, we had around about 15, 16 snapper, up to around about 7 kilos, some big trevally, some kahawai, and I went, this is really cool. The traditional way of fishing with soft baits is that you should always cast up ahead of your drift, but I'm actually finding that, in fact, many times, if there's even a slightly conflicting wind, then you're actually going to have to look for a different angle. So the traditional one was you cast up ahead of the boat of its drift, but you didn't do it directly up ahead, you did it slightly to one side or the other, so that you could then work it all the way back towards the boat, and you weren't actually fishing underneath the boat. Very often we can have the lure which it's actually being held up by the current because it's too light and the current's going past underneath too quickly, or because I've cast directly up ahead and the boat and the lure are coming together, there's too much slack being produced, so we're having to work at ways to keep tighter to the lure. So angles of casting, super important. That's the thing that for me I've had to put up with in recent times. That used to be my cutting edge against my friends who were younger, more intelligent, fitter, but they hadn't yet quite got the idea of the fact that you need to cast around at different angles according to which way the wind and the tide are interacting with each other or against each other. So when you're not getting down, or when you're finding that a lot of slack lines being produced when you're casting, you need to go and change your angles. The sort of gear you should actually use. This is a really nice rod. It's a Daiwa chili dog, and it's a bloody fantastic rod. It weighs absolutely nothing. It's around about 7.5 feet. To me, that's about the least I like. I find that a rod with more length, you can actually incorporate more qualities. So by having one that's up to 8.5 feet, you can actually have a light tip, you can have still some good hook setting capabilities, and you can still have some power. So this one happens to be quite a grunty one. It's super lightweight, and things that I also like in a good rod is having a decent foregrip. There's nothing more frustrating than when you're fighting a big fish having to hold it on a bare blank, and it really bugs me how often we have little rod foregrips on our rods because it's going to weigh less. Yes, that's right, but you're going to actually affect the function of the rod. You want to have a tool, you want to have something that's practical. So a decent foregrip that you can hold up here and fight a big fish. I'm thinking especially big kingfish and obviously some big snapper too. So I'm glad we've got that. I also like the fact that this one's got a really nice reel seat. I'm always looking for ones that have no hard edges, because so often if you have where the reel seat just binds up, you've got all these little threads and they stick in your hand over the day. And so having something nice and smooth and contoured is a really good thing to have on a rod. The other thing, of course, decent length of butt so you can get a really good two-handed cast. Casting, I can tell you now, is a huge advantage. So people who can cast well are going to catch more fish. You're going to actually cover more area. It also means the further that you can cast, say if you can cast 30 metres and it's only 20 metres deep, provided your lure's heavy enough, you have to be able to get down to the bottom, even though it's arcing, and remain, you can actually retain very good contact with that lure as it does so. So casting, definitely up to you to be as good as you can be, and that's something I teach people, is how to cast as well as possible. Other things I like about a rod like this is having a decent butt section here so that it's going to be in the rod holder without being endangered. I see so many little knobs of rods left in rod holders because it's either damaged here or they've left it in the rod holder with the lure out and it's just snapped off there. So having some padding here, if you've just got a bare blank here, go and get a little protector they can just slip on, and it's going to definitely go and help to save your rods at times. As for the reel, I've got a little Certate here. I was actually really happy to go and, I have all different brands of reels, but in this case, I think that the Daiwa was actually really, really hard to beat. This Certate range is bloody fantastic. If you just want to have one reel that you're going to be absolutely stoked with for a long time, these things are just the berries. They really, really work. Right, I'm telling on you. Right, so any sort of reel that you have should be able to take at least, I like to have 200 metres of line. It just means that we've got enough to go and handle a decent kingfish. It also means we can go and lose a little bit and still be able to fish during the day. For a practical point of view, most guys should spool theirs up with 15 to 20 pound line, and it should also be quite a high visibility colour, because if you can't see what your line's doing, it's like being a blind man, because the line indicates exactly what's going on with your soft bait. So high visibility line, really, really important. I have a long leader. Unlike Justin, I actually find that I can cast my line off my spool. And the reason why I like them long is because, although I agree with him with his nylon, it doesn't tend to spring off the spool so much. In this case, our fluorocarbon is quite a thin one, so it doesn't really matter too much. But I do like the fact that the fluorocarbon's always going to be a lot more abrasion resistant to, say, in comparison to the braid there. So I like to have a long leader. I'm often fishing amongst all the fowl, and so to have a decent length of fluorocarbon, because it's tough. First of all, it's going to trick the fish better because it's harder to see than nylon. Secondly, it just is so abrasion resistant. And yes, it's really helpful to have a guy who's on the wheel and who can race after any hooked fish as well. So most times, if we're fishing the shallows, you should have either a 3/8 of an ounce or a 1/2 ounce. We've found that those two weights are the perfect weights to get you down, but provide enough time for the fish to identify that it's actually sinking down, and then to go and meet it on the way down. There are so many days where all the fish we catch over the day are caught on the way down. If you're using a jig head that's too heavy, you're missing out. So that 3/8 to 1/2, those are the ones you really want to target if you're fishing in the shallows up to, say, 20 metres, or even a little bit beyond that at times as well. So the other thing that I also think is pretty important, this one's actually quite a small one, but I do like to have relatively small hooks as long as they're strong enough. I find that generally speaking 3/0 is a very, very good size of hook. It tends to be thick enough in the gauge so that it won't bend out on a decent fish, but there are definitely differences in brands, both in the quality and also in what they interpret as being a 3/0. The reason why I recommend the 3/0 is because it still is quite close to a compressible lure like the bait junkies and also Z-Mans, like tough ones like those. They do squish in, so they still give plenty of gape for you to hook the fish. And yeah, so it's just structural strength is important, and you just want to keep in mind just how big that lure is. That's why I do actually find the bait junkie jig heads to be some of the very best for holding on soft baits like that. They're amazing. Some people don't like them because they're so good that it makes taking your lures off quite difficult. But to me, I just want them to stay there. I don't want them being ripped off, and as far as I'm concerned, it is a fantastic thing to have in a lure head. So I've got big thumbs up. I'm not quite so keen on their really big hooks. They've got a similar trait to many other brands where the heavier the jig head, the bigger the hook, and that doesn't really follow for me. I'm still fishing for the same fish. I'm still needing the same size hook that's easy to set. I do find that big hooks can actually be quite hard to set, and I've been quite disappointed in the last just even a couple of trips. I've had fish over 20 pounds that I've caught them up quite close to that, but I've caught them over it, and 3 of them just fell off. And that's because I haven't been setting them properly. And I think it was because of the big hooks that I was using at the time. They were both 7-bar O's. So thin, strong hooks are what you want, quite small, because you don't want them to be able to, the fish to go up and grab the soft bait, but not take in the soft bait hook at the same time. You need them both close together. Now, interestingly, I've had a really close association with the competing guys, both Z-Man and with Gulp, but Scotty took me out and we had bait junkies on, and I fished one day, and I think my biggest fish on that day was 16 or 17 pounds, but I lost another one, and this is one of the ones I was thinking about with the 7-bar O, like I think it was over 20 pounds just under the boat. Also got like about a 40-pound kingfish, 10-pound trevally. So I had to go, these bait junkies are actually pretty good. So I had to really look at my former allegiances and move on. They work really well, and I've got to say, I am looking forward to these new ones here. I think what I like about them is that they're a really good colour. They're very similar to colours that have been working very, very well for me in other brands. And so I think you guys are very lucky to be amongst the first to go and try them. Okay, so how we actually fish for snapper is we do our big cast, having ascertained which direction we want to cast. We then point our rod along the line. If we see anything more than just a gentle little bit of bow coming off the end there, just a slight slackness, we wind it out. We're always pointing along it, we're always winding out any slack. Sometimes you'll see a whole heap of line is slack and you just wind it out. At the very worst, if you do that and it's more line than you should, you're moving your lure a bit further down. It might just get any fish that's close by to be triggered into coming up and biting it or gaining its attention. So don't be afraid about getting a little bit too much line in it at one time. So we then wait as the lure carries on down. The line is staying a little bit better now. So we just wait. Okay, there's a bit of slackness, wind that out, wait. Anytime we see something unusual, such as a jerk or a stutter or a sudden acceleration away or a sudden slackness, we don't strike. Because if you do that, all that happens is if they've spat it out or as you pull it out of their mouth, you're going to miss it. So instead, we do a quick wind. That serves to make them think that the fish is trying to get away, or the soft bait that's in their mouth. They clamp down harder and everything comes tight. Whack, gotcha. And it works really well. And if for any reason we've pulled it out of their mouth or they've let it go and you wind it, they go, oh, it's trying to get away from me. They race over, grab it again. So it works really well on 2 levels. It keeps it within their vicinity. Otherwise, if you whack it, they're going, what the hell happened to my meal? So you really want to just try and get into this habit. I found that casting angles and the method of actually hooking up has been my 2 advantages over my friends in the past, but unfortunately they're all pretty much caught up now. And they're fishing enough that I think they'll be teaching this old dog some new tricks too in the near future. So yes, we've got the descent. We've got pointing the rod along, responding to anything on the way down with a wind. If it gets to the bottom, it's jiggle, jiggle, let it go down. Jiggle, jiggle, let it go down. Jiggle, jiggle. And we're still watching that line, we're still waiting for something unusual to happen, and if we see anything, we're going to wind quickly to go and set it, just the same as we did as on the way down. If we don't get anything on the way to the boat, we can try a little bit of dragging. And there are some days where you'll catch all your fish doing this. And so I try to keep it really subtle. I try to keep it, the movements very small. It's just little twitches. Let it just trundle along, bouncing along the bottom, kicking up silt just like a flounder or a crab or something like that. And occasionally I might just pretend to be a rod holder, because I notice whenever I put it in the rod holder I get heaps of bites, but as soon as I hold it I don't. And I think a lot of it's about a slightly jerkier movement. So sometimes I'll just emphasise the rocking of the boat like that. But I have found more recently that just a little twitch, wait, twitch, wait. and it's very often in the paws that they'll actually take it. When they do, when you feel a bite, don't strike straight away, instead just lift it up a little bit. It's like trying to tease a kitten with some wool. You want it to grab it harder, so they bite it, you pull up a bit, they bite down harder, gotcha. So that works really, really well. Also, very often you'll find that the fish are just behind your lure that's skittering along on the top, on the bottom. All you need to do is every now and then open up the bail arm and let your lure go back about 1 metre. Put your bail arm back over. Make sure the line is in the corner, because as soon as that line comes tight and you start going underway again, you'll often get this fish jump on it and grab it. Once again, just lift up and set the hook. But usually that fish, when they do that, they hit pretty hard. So you generally don't have to go and muck around with them too much. So those are the three that's the three phases of soft baiting. It's the cast on the drop, it's the jiggling back towards you, it's the dragging of the lures behind the boat that can also work very well. You should try and incorporate them within your repertoire every time until you find out which one's actually working on the day. Sometimes it'll be a mixture. But as I say, 95% of our fish very often, certainly coming up, and especially around the anchovy season, they are actually swimming around just like kahawai and kingfish, and you can catch them from just 1 metre under the water all the way down, even though it might be 20, 25 metres. So don't assume that just because the fish has taken it very close to the surface that it's always going to be a kahawai. It could easily be a snapper as well. And of course we get some nice trevally too. As for lure colour, and sizes, it definitely is a case of the bigger the bait, the bigger the fish. While you can get elephants eat peanuts, this is the one that I was using last time when I was with Scotty. It's only one colour I ever tried. We had to go and promote it, and that's the one that got me shitloads. And I'm sure that if I was to go and take the ones that we got today and give them a go, that they'll be just as good. These bait junkies have a lot of a really nice suppleness to them that give them a really nice action, and I like that aspect to it. I like too that they're slightly buoyant, so that it slows the descent a little bit more, giving the fish a little bit more time to actually identify where they are, and when they hit the bottom, they actually lift up and they're just waving around, just like Z-mans do as well. It's something that, unfortunately for gulp, they tend to sit very hard on the bottom. They're a very dense bait. Got a great flavour, you can't beat it. But they can work very well, but you can go through a lot of them as well because they're quite fragile in comparison to these other brands. As for colour and size, there will be many days where we do get better results on the smaller ones, and in fact these days I go right down to 12-pound leader. I've got really, really small hooks, and for Auckland that's actually 90% of the time I actually find that's all you need. You're not catching fish over 4 or 5 pound. It makes absolute sense to have a 12-pound leader, 10-pound mainline, little whippy rod. But if I'm ever being serious about something, then I'm going to be using something more like this here. Now that's probably, and as for the colour, just try different ones. Like there's certain colours that always work, like yellows, oranges, browns, pilchard sort of imitations, like baitfish imitations basically. And a lot of it comes down to the time of the day and the murkiness of the water. So when it's murky, try bright colours. When it's clear and calm, try the baitfish type ones. But I mean, it's never a precise science, like if your mate's catching some, do the same thing and see what he's doing as well. Ask him what jig head weight he's using, because so often that can make a big difference. Now, I'm not going to drone on because otherwise they'll laugh at me, but I normally do this in an hour and a half, and I've really smoked through really quickly in the time that we have here. I've written everything I know about snapper and kingfish, and in fact I was really jealous when Justin was able to go and talk about stick baits and poppers, because I love doing that, and I would have been real happy to have talked about that as well. It's my other passion. And so for the price of 2 packets of soft baits or 1.5 slow jigs, you can buy everything I know in this book, and they're scattered around mostly over near the Daiwa stand, but it will arm you with everything that I know and give you a reference, knots, techniques, snapper and kingfish, all different types of lures, and $29.99. So that's about all. Is there any other questions before I let you all go? Yes?
Softbaiting from anchor.
Yeah, you absolutely can. In fact, when we, I remember being in a big contest and we were burling up and all we could catch was taupe. And so I was wondering, what can we do to try changing the outcome? And I thought, I know, I'll try on a big 7-inch soft bait, chucked it out, straight away started catching just big snapper from amongst the taupe. So, but once again, you have to treat the water like a big slow moving river. So the current, you may have to like cast up the current and let it come down and then sweep around down near the bottom. Trout fishermen will understand what I'm talking about because they fish very much the same way in a river. It's so often the tide is just a big slow river. And so you can cast it out. If it's not moving too quick, you may actually just be able to cast it out the back, let it sink down and then work it back. But yeah, I quite often find in the kaipara, for example, I'll cast out, let it get carried down in the current and then just swing around and I'll just be twitching it just down near the bottom and they'll just be smashing it. So that's just one way of doing things. But you can do it from the boat, you can do it from the rocks for sure. It's really, the great thing about soft baits, or one of the great things, is that it's only your imagination that's a limitation on it. If you think about it, you should be able to go and fish the soft bait. And especially with these lighter jig heads and just keeping in contact at all times, winding out any slack and just keeping close, direct to it.
If you're drifting, what's your ideal boat set?
That's actually quite a good question. Basically, if I've got any doubt at all, I'm going to go and put a drogue out and slow it down. So I'm going to say like about a knot and a half, something like that would be good. That sort of like covers the area pretty well and keeps you in good contact and doesn't sort of bugger your lures up too much. Okay, anything else, folks? Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. Like just having you all here. Yeah. Hello, Andre. Oh, good point, mate. So yes, sorry. The reason why gulp can outfish everything else some days is because it has unbeatable scent. It's pretty much a chunk of coloured bait. It's amazing, it really is. But of course it's very fragile. So if you haven't got a lot of money, like me, then I'm going to go and look for a more durable product. And it's going to be something like the Bait Junkies or Z-Man. And in order to go and get them to within about 3/4 as good as gulp, you can get something like Procure or Secret Sauce and go and put it in the belly slit of those products, and you'll give them something that actually it'll make them actually hang on for longer, or it'll make them have another go. So to me, having scent is incredibly important, especially at certain times of the year where they can spit it out really quickly if they're not that hungry. You're like, especially over the winter when their metabolism's quite slow. If you can't trick them into making them think that it really is a proper bit of fish, they're going to spit it out. So having scent to keep them engaged, to commit them to actually hang on for longer, the more you have time to go and detect that they're there and set the hook, the better it's going to be for you. And if you miss, if you can get them to bite again, so much the better. So thanks for that, Andre.
Just a couple of quick things. We just heard from the expert himself that gulp is a bait, therefore it's banned from this year's Lure Masters. So we'll just clarify that. No one's allowed to use bait this year. It's biodegradable, it's a protein, it breaks down. Unlucky. Thanks for coming. We'll see you all next weekend for the competition. Bloody good. Good, how are you? Good to see you too.